Andrew Urquhart with you on a Monday morning. Do hope that your weekend was a good one. This time on a Monday morning, my pleasure to welcome to the show Jonathan Ayling from the Free Speech Union. Jonathan, kia ora.
Good morning.
Good weekend for you. A busy time, I imagine, as always, with the Free Speech Union.
A busy time working away for all Kiwis' speech rights, but also, Andrew, I have to say this weekend, carving out a little bit of time for some celebration too. You know, we've had some good wins recently, and on Friday afternoon, I will admit I was actually feeling a little bit under the weather, and my day was turned around by a release that the Minister of Justice put out.
Which is not every day. Usually a release from the Minister of Justice is going to wreck your day, I imagine, at the Free Speech Union. But hey, turned your frown upside down. Not a bad start to the weekend, Jonathan.
That's right. For quite some time, we had been waiting for appointments of the new Chief Human Rights Commissioner, and associated with that, two other appointments where there were vacancies at the time. And the new Race Relations Commissioner that role has been given to Dr. Melissa Darby. A wonderful woman, an intelligent, strong leader, and a senior lecturer at Waikato University, a founding member of the Free Speech Union, and a good, strong free speech advocate, which is exactly what we need, both in the Human Rights Commission generally, and specifically with respect to the questions around race relations at the moment. The best path forward is to facilitate more understanding, more empathetic, and more open conversations, and I think she will be ideal for that role.
And not disagreeing with that at all, but getting one of your founders into one of the top jobs, I think that's a triple win for a lobbying organisation, but also, of course, good news for free speech.
Absolutely, and so we'll take all those victories and have a nice weekend as a result. Look, Andrew, unsurprisingly, this has left many of our opponents and critics, quite put out. I would suggest that there's nothing remotely untoward about this. Melissa Darby has achieved this position on her own merits, and of course, the appointments to these positions go through an incredibly rigorous role led by the Public Service Commission. So I don't think anyone can shake their fingers at the process, and the individual in particular is someone who has worked internationally in the space. She was a Fulbright scholar and has done a lot of work on Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah. And I think we have a lot to learn, both in terms of the civil rights movement with respect to race relations in the United States, but also the incredible champion of individual liberties and free speech that Martin Luther King Jr. was. And a famous saying that he said was, in the end, it will not be the words of our opponents, but the silence of our friends that matters the most. And I think what King contributes to that debate around free speech, and what Melissa Darby will also draw on, is the need for us to each participate in these conversations. The entire idea around free speech, the idea of the marketplace of ideas, only works if everyone is plugging into it. Yeah. The idea that good ideas will beat bad ideas doesn't work if the people who have good ideas are too polite and too respectable and too shy to contribute them. At that point, unfortunately, the bad ideas will float to the top, and the issue is not free speech. It's that there isn't enough speech. People are too reticent from participating. And I think across a number of really critical issues, but chief amongst them would be race relations, that is the reality today. And it is becoming a very shallow conversation, one end or the other as a result. We need the moderate middle to participate, to be willing to join that conversation, to speak out. And I think new leaders that we have in this space will champion that call.
And hey, there will be people who are upset at her appointment. It is their right to be upset. That's their freedom of speech to exercise and express that. But from certainly from what you're communicating, this isn't, oh yes, we'll give her the pass because she's friends with Jonathan Ayling. In fact, that's probably worked against her. But actually, meritocracy, she's certainly done the work. And I suppose something that we've seen is in a situation where there are people of different ethnic persuasion within a society, actually free speech helps a minority in that scenario.
That's absolutely right. And it's a ludicrous idea, Andrew, that is often shared, that somehow free speech enables and emboldens and empowers those who are already enabled and emboldened and empowered, those who hold privilege. It's a nonsense idea that if someone has wealth and privilege and power, that this radical idea that anyone should be able to criticize them, that everyone should have a voice, how on earth does that strengthen their case? Free speech is about making sure even if you don't have privilege and you don't have power, you don't have resources, you still get to have your say. And that means those who are least privileged in a society, those who are most vulnerable, have participation still. And really, what is at the core of the concerns around Melissa Darby's placement and Stephen Rainbow, the new chief human rights commissioner as well, is that they do believe in the right for everyone to participate in conversations. And this comes down not so much, ironically, even though Melissa Darby is the new race relations commissioner, it does not come down to the question of race relations. It comes down to the question of sex and gender. And the question of sex and gender is run almost exclusively on linguistic questions. It's run on questions related to the use of pronouns, on dead naming, on the way we define the word woman. And so where these conversations are more abstract and they run on linguistic terms, it is about shutting down a conversation. And so at that point, it is not, no one's claiming that they're not well enough qualified. No one is claiming that they're not the right placement. It is that they think the wrong thing on these ideas. And what they think is that everyone should be able to have a say. For someone related to the Human Rights Commission, I think that's a pretty realistic expectation for them to expect to hold that line. And what's so controversial is that for years, the Human Rights Commission has been populated by individuals who have stood against the foundational liberty of human rights, which is the right to speak freely. And so it's a bit of a course correction, I realize, but it's a needed one.
And now, in terms of the Human Rights Commission, I mean, some people would get alarm bells because of the gentleman's surname. However, give us a little bit more of a background, what your optimistic expectations are of the sort of changes that this will make from the Human Rights Commissioner and his office.
Well, look, proof will be in the pudding. And so we've seen really strong comments and commitments in the past. Let's see how that translates into action. Of course, the commissioners play an important role, but the staff of the Human Rights Commission also need to do some heavy lifting in terms of redirecting the commission to stand up for speech rights. However, Stephen Rainbow has taken a nuanced and moderate view on many of these questions with a clear understanding, it would seem, of the importance of speech to protect every other right. And so with that understanding, we are hopeful that in comparison to where in the past the Human Rights Commission has been one of the biggest opponents of speech rights in New Zealand, and a number of commentators have said effectively the Free Speech Union has been the Human Rights Commission because of the fact that we are standing up for that foundational liberty. Hopefully now we will see this important body actually do the heavy lifting that is needed to defend what is an unavoidable freedom in a democracy. Free speech only exists in democracies, and democracy only exists with free speech. It is integral to the way we pursue self-government, and unfortunately, it's been neglected for too long. Hopefully, that's about to change.
Something which the current government is big on is the balance of rights and responsibilities, particularly in the area of the right of free speech. Also, of course, some responsibility to make sure that we don't use our words in a way which is derogatory or hurtful or, dare I say it, hateful. A balance of these two things within the Human Rights Commission, do you think?
Well, I think it's probably a bit early to speculate. Let's see. I do have concerns around the way the government does run with this line of rights and responsibilities, as if you don't do your fair share, you don't have human rights anymore. That's not how human rights work at all. Human rights exist by the mere fact that I have dignity as an individual, that you have dignity as an individual. And so I do think that, of course, we want to evoke responsibility and participation and an understanding of how our actions influence others, the way we use our freedoms influence others. But I don't want people to think that if we don't then agree with them on certain issues and how those rights should be used, we forfeit them. And I think that is part of the subtle tone that particularly Christopher Luxon has run with. I think that there is a greater diversity of opinions now in the Human Rights Commission than there has been for a very long time. And that alone will provoke new conversations and necessitate new compromise and agreeing to disagree. And this is healthy in a democracy. It means that there will be representation for people and perspectives that previously hasn't been there or hasn't been there for some time. That is a good sign.
A diversity in broader ways than just a multiplicity of pronouns, perhaps. Jonathan, appreciate your time and your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.